Good morning and welcome to the Leadership and Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by Megan, who is CEO of Anansi. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Alex. Very happy to be here today.
Yeah, well, I thank you for being here. I've already complimented you on your excellent plants in the background.
These are real plants. This isn't a Zoom background.
Yeah, I know, but that's the thing. That's what I think's rare about them. I was like, you've got a nice looking background that's very well curated. So I applaud you on that. I'm running a sort of unofficial competition for the best background on the podcast.
Oh, great.
And you're up there. You're up there just because it's not a dodgy fake Zoom background like mine. Look, before we dive into the podcast, it'd be wonderful if you could introduce yourself and the Anansi business, please.
Yes, of course. So I'm Megan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Anansi, and we're on a mission to digitize goods in transit insurance to make it faster, fairer, and more flexible for e-commerce businesses globally.
Fantastic! Look at that. That's succinct. We've been on the pitch round funding.
No, we just have a new marketing person, so we've now got much smoother, nailed our elevator pitch now.
I love that. I always think that I've said a few times. I think if you can't get it in a couple of sentences, then the definition of what the business is doing is not clear enough. So that's fantastic. Goods in transit insurance. Presumably, how does that work from a mechanics point of view? It's an embedded insurance offering?
Yes, absolutely. So we're embedded directly into, well, for example, third-party logistics or e-commerce platforms, and eventually large retailers and freight forwarders. So we have a sort of data connection, a continuous data connection, so we see when items are being shipped. We then augment that with tracking data so that we can then monitor all the items when they leave the warehouse. And that enables us to settle claims parametrically. So effectively, lost and delayed parcels are a parametric process, and it just happens in the background with the policyholder not needing to do anything. And then for damage, which we're launching next month, they will have to submit photographic evidence, and then our claims administrator will take a look. But we still do all of the claims payments directly back into their bank accounts. The whole process is from end to end as smooth and automated as we can make it.
Fantastic. Yeah. It's such a slick solution, I think, to such a kind of obvious problem, and I want to say it's obvious, but it's always obvious when someone kind of goes, "That's what we're going to do," and they come up with it. But I always think those are the best ideas. There's such a and particularly with the use case now, it's so much. We're obsessed with getting everything delivered. I don't think I've been to a shop in years now. I'm on these dreadful people that just gets everything delivered. I was going to ask you about embedded. Obviously, we're at the sort of almost, I don't know, the height. I don't think it's the height, because I think embedded is just a very natural solution to insurance and distribution of insurance. But do you worry that there's so much going on in embedded that impacts your ability to grow? Sorry to start with a kind of like challenging, slightly negative question.
No, not at all. I mean, we were both obviously at InsurTech Insights the other week, and obviously everyone's talking about embedded. But one of the big takeaways for me is that I think a lot of people are talking a little bit across purposes when they're talking about embedded, and that's part of the problem. So we had this in the keynote from Erickson Chan, where he said basically embedded insurance, as in putting insurance into distribution channels via API, isn't new, and that's not really a revolution. And that's why there are a lot of people asking questions, isn't this just affinity insurance rebranded, which effectively, if that's your definition of embedded, it basically is. It's not it's not really sort of moving, changing anything significantly than, moving something online that wasn't, it's maybe previously more offline. But what we're talking about with embedded is really like the whole process from end to end. So, and we see obviously distribution is very key for any insurance MGA. You need to get distribution to get the scale. But the real improvement, or I guess what we're really trying to do, is to improve the underlying product. And it's really having access to the data, which is what enables us to provide this sort of insurance without inconvenience sort of type of concept. And that's where we see the real benefit of embedding insurance, because, I guess the issue is that once you have access to the data, you're then able to do some much more exciting things around personalization of the offer. You can also look at in the future at pricing and how you can make that pricing a lot more personalized. And then you can also have that embedded kind of sort of automated parametric claims experience as well through having access to the data. So I guess when we look at embedded, we're looking at it with a very particular lens about this end-to-end digitized solution and how we can really deliver insurance that just works in the background without a lot of input from the user. So it goes far beyond just placing it in a platform and then really hoping for the best, because there's no point buying an insurance product really easily and then something goes wrong and you have this terrible claims experience. And then you wonder why you did it in the first place.
Yeah, I'm laughing with a slight wry grin because that's what happened to me. Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction. Is like you're sort of trying to offer this true embedded, happening in the background, frictionless process, as opposed to, I think when a lot of people talk about embedded or think about embedded, particularly when they align it with affinity, they're talking about an embedded sales, it's an embedded sale of insurance,
exactly,
and nothing else, and then that's not shifting the dial, as you rightly said. That's just I've never bought it, and also I don't know if it works either, because I know I'm not getting anything new. So for example, I've never bought travel insurance via an airplane. But when I've booked a flight, I've never bought that travel insurance. I've subsequently then gone and bought travel insurance. I would buy it if it offered me something richer and different and more ingrained with my process. So yeah, very, very different. So yeah, I think that distinction is really important.
And the other distinction you bring up really well is that when a lot of people talk about embedded, they stop at the personal lines insurance. So I was at a presentation, a webinar, I think it was last week, with McKinsey, and they'd done this whole risk report around embedded insurance, and they literally didn't mention anything about small business insurance or commercial lines or how you can embed. And that's really where we see this huge opportunity, effectively.
That's really interesting. I was reading a report yesterday, which wasn't the same report, and it was like, these are 15 embedded insurance providers. Well, firstly, they weren't, and some of them weren't, and also in itself, they'd not explored the differential between them, and it was massive. Some were personal lines focused, some were commercial lines focused, some were entire. Like they'd listed Element, which is a carrier which happens to have this sort of embedded as a distribution model. You had others that were just offering software. So I think I would almost take it back to InsurTech. I was asked earlier, what do you include within that? Because we say that we're an InsurTech specialist recruitment business. And someone really put me on the back foot a little bit and said, well, we'll define it. And I said, well, I appreciate that's one of the problems. Well, what is that? And when we get into these terms, embedded, we have to be very clear what we mean when we're defining that. But I think some of the misconceptions are the things that are leading to people, lazy commentators like me going, well, everyone's talking about embedded and what's different about it, which is why I wanted to start with that, because I think it's important that we define, what's different about the business and the different business model. So I want to talk about claims, because I think it's really important that we talk about claims. The fact that you're kind of building this in that you've got parametric as one method, but also you're looking at damage, so you're going to kind of have a claims process. You talk about claims being a sort of key to an excellent insurance experience. What does that mean for you in practical terms? What are you going to put in play that's going to make that claims process, best in class?
Well, claims is my favorite topic in insurance.
Yes, it's not just me.
and my team are already starting laughing at me, because every time I write a blog post, I always have this phrase that claims is the shop window for insurance, because effectively that's what we're doing. We're promising that we'll pay a claim, a valid claim, when it's due, and valid there's a lot of work in that sentence as well.
Sure.
So but I mean, I think for me, claims really starts at the point of the sale, the whole claims process. So firstly, are you being very clear about what is and what is not covered as part of this product, when someone takes this on? And I think any insurance company has always got to continue to sort of challenge themselves as to how are they presenting information, is it as clear as possible, and are people really clear? So for example, at the moment we only cover lost and delayed parcels. We're bringing in damage next month, so we have to be very upfront that about what's not covered and which we only currently serve the UK. We're then adding international pricing. So we don't want to, someone to purchase the insurance on an understanding that's a bit of a misconception. So that's obviously the key first part of the claim. Are you going in with your eyes open? And, is there sufficient knowledge around the product? Is there customer service? Can you ask questions and that sort of thing? But then when you come to, I guess, what more people think about as claims is the actual process itself. As I mentioned, we're using a parametric process to assess lost and delayed parcels. So so our platform is able to calculate an expected delivery date for an item when it departs the warehouse, and then we basically monitor the item to see, is it delivered a day later than that date, or after 5 days it's sort of deemed as being lost. But then we have an audit process to make sure it hasn't turned up and it's not just a sort of an issue with the data. So we do see there's a huge amount of opportunity in parametric insurance. So using data in order to do a lot of the heavy lifting around claims, because why should people have to fill in a form of data that actually the insurance company already has in order to make a claim? So we want to really just make sure that people are, our policyholders only have to do the minimum amount of work in order to to really get those claims paid. We have a dashboard so they can see where where items are, what's being delivered, and where claims where claims have arisen during the month. And then we are bringing in this parametric process for claims assessment for the damaged items with our claims administrator. But I think the other exciting thing that we're doing on claims is integrating open banking. So we currently have a connection with because it's a business to business product. So we effectively have a connection with the businesses who have our insurance. So at the end of the month, after they paid their premium, 7 days later, we settle all of the claims which have happened during that month as well, directly into their bank account. So, again, they don't, there's no further transferring of details. Everything's all connected, and it should just really run smoothly from that moment onwards.
It sounds so simple, doesn't it? I mean, I think that's what's so frustrating about it. So I don't know if I shared this with you, but so I worked in claims, and then for the first 8 years of my recruitment career, I only hired claims professionals, senior claims professionals. So I'm a big one for champion claims. But one of the things I've raised a couple of times now, and it took me ages to sort of spot this, but I had all these, I think we're nearly 100 podcasts in, had all these conversations about customer centricity, but I was only talking to insurtechs that essentially dealt with distribution. And I thought, well, where's the investment in claims? Where's the investment in claims technology? Where's the kind of streamlining of that process and making that process better? Because if we're talking about customer centricity, again, that's what you're buying with insurance, is a promise to pay. And I think it's so crucial what you said there is that it comes back to all the way to the start, because all the complaints we ever got so I worked in commercial claims and I deal with relationship, it was always about lack of clarity about what was covered and what wasn't covered, and lack of communication. Because if you're going to get a no, it's not covered, you want that as quick as possible. It's like anything. So, but it amazes me how sort of simple that is. Going beyond kind of what you've got planned on the slate, is there any kind of desire to build in things like visual AI, so people can send
100%. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, so we're still at the earlier stage of our journey, it was of building out the platform, but we can definitely see in the future there's an opportunity to build out some visual AI, so that we can, particularly for the smaller or maybe the less valuable items that we're shipping, so that there's a way of fully automating that process below a certain threshold of is the item really damaged, and then we can completely automate that, and that will obviously then bring down the cost of servicing those smaller claims as well, which again is another benefit to the customers that we're working with.
Sure. And I want to talk to you now about partnerships. Obviously with embedded, that's key to success of a solution. What I put this down as, what opportunities have partnerships provided for you, which I think is a really bad question. I'm wondering why I let it go out. So I suppose I wanted to dig into what is a partnership? How does it work for you? Where do you see where are you now with your partnerships? Where do you see it going in the future? and then to kind of move on to talk about stumbling blocks, but just to sort of start with, where are you now with partnerships, and where do you want to be? Where do you see this going?
Mm-hmm. Well, we definitely see partnerships as being a really key pillar of our distribution strategy, because as we all know, no one wakes up in the morning thinking about where they can buy buy additional features of insurance. Yeah. So, and then, as we mentioned before, when we were talking about embedding, the whole industry is moving towards, insurance being sold in places where it's most relevant to people. And, partnerships is really the way of doing that. And, effectively, it's actually almost like a sort of a win-win for the partners that we're speaking to. So we're starting with third-party logistics partners. So these are the businesses. So if you have an e-commerce business, often you send your items to a warehouse. So if they come from, wherever, China or wherever you've had your thing built, the whole, I guess all of the stock goes to these third-party logistics partners, and they then break it down as you get sales into the smaller packages, package that together, and they send it out. So they're the sort of hub for your business in whichever your country is. They're being asked every day by the businesses that work with them how to find insurance. And at the moment, they don't really have a very good recommendation to make, because a lot of their companies have had maybe bad experiences with some of the other alternative providers. So for us to be able to go in to say, look, we can plug into your platform, which is already connected to all the other e-commerce platforms, we can just take that data directly, and we can offer a solution which is much faster, fairer, and more flexible for the businesses you work with. It's it's really been very well received by those sorts of businesses, because it's an add-on that they can provide. Obviously they will have a share of the sort of commission structure there, because they're they're obviously key in that distribution chain. So it's really it's really helping them provide a better solution to their customers, and also giving us access to relevant customers for us. And we're also having similar conversations with e-commerce platforms, online marketplaces, large retailers, and then in the future, as we are able to deal with much larger shipments with freight forwarders and such like.
Yeah. It's really you've got a really diverse array of partners, hasn't you? Because the solution has like multiple touch points, so it's quite an interesting and proposition. And could someone come directly to you as well and buy it, or is it only going to be distributed via those kind of partnerships? So
I guess the key to data is key to actually enabling us to provide this product. So we need to have some connection to the stores, sort of, I guess, information about what they have in their warehouse and when the things are leaving. So we do have a connection on Shopify. So Shopify businesses can use our insurance product, and then beyond that, we'll be embedding directly with logistics partners who often serve businesses that have a variety of different e-commerce platforms they work with. So I guess that's going to be one of the sort of strategic issues we'll be grappling with over the next few years, as to I guess the trade-offs between, we don't have infinite resources, so we will have to pick our bets in terms of which platforms and partners to embed with, and that's really going to be key to see how quickly we're going to be able to scale the solution. And it's interesting, once you've got those partnerships with those businesses, I'm already thinking of like other opportunities for insurance distribution via the same partners. Is there a viewpoint that you might yourself do a partnership with another insurtech, for example, that has would have a benefit from being embedded into Shopify, or would you potentially look at new lines of business as you kind of grow? Yeah, no, it's a really interesting idea, because actually, when we embarked on this part of the strategy, we were very much thinking along, this is what we want from a partnership. But now suddenly all these other ideas are coming out of the woodwork, because as we start having conversations. So there's also the partners that we're working with. So for example, the logistics partners would also like us to refer them to new business as well. So it could work two ways, as in, if we find businesses that want to have our solution, but the way to do that would be with one of those partners, that could be a partnership. Similarly, there might be other insurance companies that have maybe lines of insurance which are related to what we want to do, but not what we want to do. So for example, on the trade credit side or the product liability side, we could potentially have some sort of introducer arrangement there. So it could end up being this kind of multi-dimensional partnership matrix, with what we're doing. But I mean, I think at the moment we want to be quite focused. I think it's quite difficult. I think one thing we were really advised by some of the, so we have some investors who are very senior in the insurance industry. And originally we were kind of looking at doing a much wider range of insurance products for within the e-commerce market. And they really advised that, look, if you narrow down, just focus on one line of business and do it really excellently and get scale with that, that's going to enable you to grow much more quickly than to having all of this complexity of adding other insurance lines effectively.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I can see that as well. Do one thing, do it well, and then worry about the other multiple choice options that you're going to offer. So I want to take it back to the beginning, actually, because you're sort of running out of ways to say this politely to people now. It's like, you're not an insurance person per se, and you've had a really interesting career. So I sort of wanted to know, and I appreciate I'm going completely off the script now. Why insurance, why insurtech, and sort of why now, I think is kind of my question.
No, absolutely. No, happy to answer that. So I guess, I worked in VC for a number of years, specializing in clean technology and industrial efficiency. And I got really excited about, the businesses that we were seeing, which were taking software and using it to improve an industrial process. So we were working with businesses like telematics businesses and process efficiency. And it's interesting now to see, telematics being such a key part of the insurtech industry now, having seen it from a different context a number of years ago. So I left that because I really wanted to actually have a startup or work in a startup. And so I took a bit of a deep dive into data science and some of the machine learning, really early stage machine learning projects. And then I sort of stumbled across the insurance industry and, all of the work that people were doing to bring more continuous data, particularly into insurance products. Originally started looking, very broadly at sort of the small business insurance sector, and then we narrowed down to here. And Anna, my co-founder, comes from a fintech background. So she was one of the early developers at Money Farm, also worked in BNP Paribas risk systems department. And she was really excited about, how we could bring some of the developments and the data pipeline she'd worked on in the fintech space into a business insurance product. And that's really how we started out.
Sure. And how did you know each other as co-founders? Did you know each other?
So we met when we were both in London. We're both in the UK rather. So yeah. So she was working in London. She was keen to to take the leap into a startup. And yeah, we met in the days when we used to have meetups and be able to actually meet other human beings from time to time when we left our houses.
Yeah, I know. It was so funny. I mean, you mentioned InsurTech Insights, which obviously you and I met face to face, having spoken previously. And I was just saying how strange it was for me. But what I've found now is that I do so many meetings on Zoom, listen to so many podcasts, and everyone, me included, has a podcast these days, that I was kind of almost over familiar with people. And I was like, oh, I've met that person. It acted like I suddenly went, oh, I've never met them in person. But it does show you the importance of that. And I think, when you go back to your VC days, when I started working with VCs, mainly when I started doing InsurTech specialist recruitment business stuff, was how important networks are and how important it is to kind of, just have people to turn to for advice and meet. And you I think you only truly feel comfortable doing that when these are people that you've got to know in person. I suspect that will change. I'm definitely getting better at kind of just building rapport over kind of meetings, but I think, you still miss that bit of magic. I know people have done this, but I can't imagine starting a business with someone that I've never met in person. Yes.
No, I can't. And also because we started, pre-pandemic, we also, although we basically worked remotely with each other from day one, we have spent about 6 months working in the same office and speaking to each other on a more daily basis. So we know each other really well. And it was that foundation we then used to move, to work with each other remotely. But
sure.
But definitely there are other people in the team that I've never met. We've just recruited them over Zoom, and we've been working together for months, and we've never actually met in person.
Yeah. It's so strange. I wanted to ask you about that then. Your experience of building an InsurTech in the midst of a pandemic, and aside from your co-founder, I would imagine most of the team were hired remotely,
everyone was hired remotely.
Everyone was hired remotely. So what was that experience like? Yeah.
Well, we were always planning to be a fully remote team even before the pandemic. So it was always very much in our DNA. At one point, Anna was quite keen to be a digital nomad and sort of move around Europe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that, obviously that pandemic has sort of curtailed our abilities to do that. So
Yeah.
she's based in Portugal, and we've got a number of other team members in Portugal and the UK, and I'm in Germany as well. So, I mean, I think the key difference with a remote team is we just had to be very intentional about every step of the way, even from being a very early stage. So, what were our, the values that we have, so we have a foundation for how we interact with each other, how we go about recruitment and taking a lot of care in the onboarding process. It's not just like someone's going to turn up next week and they just get given a laptop or something. We have to make sure that they know, how we work and, how they can move into the team. And then, obviously we have to have, some business processes that enable us all to work together like that. But, and it will always evolve. We're 8 people now, when we're sort of 20 people, it'll be very, very different sort of business. But, I think being a fully remote sort of team is one of the things our team members really appreciate, and it's really attracted some really high quality people that we could just not ever have recruited if we were forcing everyone into an office in London 3 days a week.
Sure. How do you instill a sense of culture remotely? What have you, and I'm obviously only from your experience. I'm not asking you to solve culture from remote teams for us, but what sort of little steps have you made to kind of make sure that there's still a culture there for the business?
I mean, I think it starts with all of the small things. It starts with the big things, which is, so we've got some company values, which we started very early in the journey of the business. So, and we have a mixture of sort of team values, which is how we interact with each other, and organizational values. So how we as a group of people, how we're running our business, how we treat our customers and that sort of thing. And then, we've always been very sort of intentional that, even in terms of how we do project management, we have one system which the whole company uses, because we've heard that, some people have, a system that the developers use, and then marketing uses something totally different, and then everyone's just interacting in all these different ways. So, we have, everyone uses, we use monday.com. So we're setting this whole thing up so you can see there's a lot of transparency across the organization, so everyone can kind of see what's going on, who's doing what. And we have regular team meetings, where we discuss communication. Actually, it's always like a standing thing, what's working, what's not working, how can we improve, how we work together. And it's interesting because every person you bring into the team, they bring a sort of a new dynamic. So how we doing team socials a couple of months ago might be changing now that we have different personality types and people with new ideas about how we do things. So it will always sort of be ebbing and flowing and evolving over time. But I think obviously the values are the foundation, and having transparency and continuous communication, it's like any relationship, organizational relationship, that sort of evolves over time.
Yeah, no, I completely bind.
But even on your idea about culture, I mean, it's sometimes the small things, like, we were just having some branding, with our new marketing person coming in, and just having, even when someone starts an internal document, to have it branded. So you remember you're working, this is the company you're working for, we have this sort of, so you're coming into Slack, and you're sort of seeing things, done in a certain way. I think, even those small things, make a difference. So you're not going in and seeing the logo of the company on the walls or, the doors, but you're coming into, Slack and Monday. So it's like a virtual environment. It's a virtual environment, but you're still seeing reminders during the day that of who you're working with and what this business stands for.
I think that's so important. I was talking to someone earlier, a potential client actually, before this call, and we were talking about that, and they're well, like most of my clients, are a very early stage business. There are 11 people. They're going to be 20 people by the end of the year. And we were talking about, what's in place, and it's very refreshing, and it's quite sort of good for me to hear. They were going, we like to think like a 50-person business, and we're a 10-person business. And when we're a 50-person business, we think we need to think like a 200-person business. And I thought that was always a really healthy thing. I mean, from a recruitment standpoint, one of the things that I'm always slightly aghast and shocked and horrified by is the lack of a process, for example, and it doesn't have to be complicated, but who's responsible for the recruitment process? What is that recruitment process? What does it look like? Because similarly to you coming on board and everything has to be branded, I think everyone has to have the same experience coming in. That speaks to fairness, but it also speaks to just professionalism. People join businesses that are small, but they don't join businesses that are not professional, that are not,
That's so true.
structured, because you have to feel reassured. You go, well, they ran a really good process, so I feel reassured this was a proper, onboarding process. And the here's a laptop and go and sit in your bedroom and you work for the business remotely now is the horror story.
Yes, exactly.
But I think a lot of people experience that, and that's.
But people experience that in person businesses. I mean, we had someone who joined us, and they said that their previous business wasn't remote, but they turned up, and there was no one at the office. They weren't even sure if they got to the right place, and then they were sort of wandering around, and then someone turned up, and they got a laptop, and it was just horrendous. That was it.
I've had some. I mean, obviously, I've been doing this a long time, but one that always resonates with me that was that I would run a search for a really senior hire for a London market services business in the insurance industry. And they had a bit of a mixed reputation at the time. They were having problems with their share prices, and all of this came out for the process. And we'd thought of, this is how we're going to tackle that messaging. This is how we're going to tackle that. And we'd done it, and we weren't being disingenuous. It was just, we're actually being really transparent, which is something I always encourage to say, like, this is the problem, this is what we're doing about it. And we ran a really good search and found a fantastic person to join the business, resign, they start this business. And on day one, they had, back in the day of business, they had no business cards ready, they hadn't sorted them out their phone, they didn't have their laptop, they didn't even have a desk. And it was just all of these things. So they're going, all of the things I was worried about this business just sort of really hit home, and that person left within 3 months.
Such a shame. Yeah. Because there's no point in doing all this work to hire people if you then can't keep them afterwards.
It'd be like selling insurance and then providing bad claims. You're gonna lose that person. So we mentioned values, in this conversation, and we'd had a specific conversation about values and strong values. And why has it been so important for you to have these strong company values from day one? And I know that kind of almost answers itself, but I really want to just kind of get your view on why it's important to, I suppose, businesses really, especially coming from your venture background, to have strong values from day one.
I mean, I think, I think the values really are the foundation. So, they really sort of set the tone for how you want to operate. And it's very difficult to retrofit values on a business. So, everyone has values which I think reflect the leadership personally. So, Anna and I have values that which we believe in. So people first is our first value, and that that's always been the sort of foundational one. But I think definitely it helps with recruiting people. So we've had a couple of people who've come to us recently who've said they've literally never seen the word integrity in the company's values before, or in the job description of any type. And but it's not just enough also to have these values. You also need to live them. So finding ways to celebrate people, or celebrate the values, or recognize people that have acted in accordance with the values, or when you're making decisions, to refer back to the values as well. So that's an ongoing it just sort of gives you, I guess, a North Star for if you're doing something, how are you going to go about doing that? What is this, what way does this organization operate effectively? So I think that's why we started off with those values.
Yeah, I think the retrofitting thing's really interesting. I mean, you're saying about integrity. I worked at a business that had integrity written on the walls, and it was a great business. Integrity was not part of the value structure. Like it just wasn't. I was like, you can write it on the walls many times as you like, but it's not. It just wasn't core. And do you know what? That's okay. I'm not suggesting that it was just some Machiavellian awful business. It wasn't, but it was a sales focused business, and it was focused on sales, and not at any cost, but certainly kind of, it wasn't like, oh, integrity is our core value. And I thought, you're trying to create values that you're not living. Yeah. It's like going, I'm going to go to the gym 6 times a week. when you know you're only going three. Three's fine. It's fine to say three.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it does, like everyone, I think the key in values is authenticity.
Yes.
So I don't know if you've read Super Pumped by Mike Isaac about Uber.
I haven't. No,
It's
I
such
haven't.
a great book. So it goes, it's this whole like expose into like Uber from day one. And actually, I really like the original Uber values, because whatever you think about Uber as a business, the values really reflected the founders and actually how the business operated. And I think they were really authentic values that helped to drive the growth of that business through all of those times. And then it's so interesting then seeing the second version of the values, which came in with the new CEO. And it's probably a similar situation where those are the values on the wall, but do they really reflect the organization? And it's because they're not sort of organically built from the sort of the ground up, as it were. So yeah, it's interesting.
I think that's the thing with founder-led businesses, which I find so interesting. With founder-led businesses or founding teams still in the building, I think you, as a founder, one of the great privileges is you get to imprint your own values on that business. But once a business hits scale, I'm always that you need to ask the business, you ask the team, what are our values? You can't dictate them. At that point, a business becomes big enough that if it's not core and it's not grown out, and therefore, you can keep integrity as one of your values if it's been the lifeblood of that business. But once you get to a certain size, you have to ask the team, and the team might say integrity, and that's great, but they also might say some other values, and you struggle at that point. It's like trying to herd water. At that point, it's a living, breathing thing, and it's very difficult to do. So yeah, one of the privileges I think of starting any business is values. I mean, the reason I started my business is I didn't believe in the value structure of a lot of recruitment businesses out there. There's some great ones. I just hadn't, and I'd worked with some great ones, but still, the things that I found important were sort of long-term relationships and creativity and try and do things differently. And it was more like, no, hard work and do the same thing all the time constantly, and that was successful from a sort of sales perspective, but I just didn't believe in it, and I thought it could be done differently. But you have to start a business to have that opportunity. I really don't even think you can go in as a CEO, and the Uber example is perfect, and then dictate the culture. I just don't think you can do that. I'm sure someone will disagree with me, and that's fine. Talking about kind of like broader values, something else you'd written about, which was I wanted to ask you on a practical level how this works, but also kind of how you've looked at diversity and inclusion at Anansi, because it's something that you and I have spoken about and that you'd written about, and kind of what practical sort of measures and steps you're taking in growing a business along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, something we're really passionate about. And, I think obviously, we are a diverse founding team. So, we're living that, so we're an example of that, I guess, within the business. So that's a start. But, obviously, but saying that, we do see diversity as spanning beyond gender. So it does cover, neurodiversity, educational backgrounds, race and all those other things. So I think it's important to see diversity in a quite holistic sense. I mean, I guess, what we're, I guess in terms of like practical things, we do see it coming down to, I guess the small, more day-to-day nitty-gritty things. So it's things like, where are you placing job ads? For example, are you thinking very intentionally about where what you're doing with that? How are you writing those ads? Is the language that you're using going to attract a diverse candidate? So we've got something about encouraging people with 75% of the skills to apply, because studies have shown that often women are put off if they don't meet every single bit of the criteria. And that was definitely something that attracted our partnerships lead to applying for the role, even though she hadn't worked for a startup before, for example. And I think there's also things like who's then being actually going through the process to being interviewed. Is the diversity going through that whole process, having making sure that you're careful about the questions that you're asking people. And then as we mentioned before, that it's not enough even once you've made a diverse hire to make sure that people feel valued and included in how we go about doing things. So for example, we've got our first team retreat coming up next week, so we've got to think about not everyone wants to drink heavily not every, so you just got to think, plan activity. Everyone's different ages as well. We've got a real diverse range of people. People have, very different interests. So, how can we plan some time that we can get to know each other, but everyone will feel included in the activities, and we'll all come away, having really appreciated the time together. So it just really requires you to always think with a bit of a diversity lens, in really the holistic sense of how you're going about doing things.
Yeah, I think it's so important. It's so underplayed. I had my it's not very helpful for a podcast, but I was smiling throughout when you were saying about where you post your job ads and how you write your job ads. And and it was great. I remember you telling me before that your partnerships leads had brought that up, and you had that specific line saying, look, if you've only got 75% of these skills, please apply. We want to talk to you. But does that mean that, I suppose, what going on from the practical steps, does that mean that you have to spend more time on it than perhaps otherwise you might, do you think? And so there's a time, you have to be prepared to commit that time. This is the
problem, when people say, oh, there's a trade-off, we're spending, because it's not a lot more time. Like what, right. I guess the alternative is if you spend, you take the time to have a proper process in the first place, and then you don't then have to spend months trying to find someone because someone you've recruited leaves after like 3 months, and also the money you may have spent recruiting them as well. So I think it's just important that people look at it as diversity isn't like this thing that you just add on to the business. It really is integral to having a workforce that reflects your customer base. So it's going to make you much more better able to serve the customers you're working with. And also there's all this research showing diverse teams perform better. And it was interesting because I saw some research the other day that said that actually it's because there's like more conflict in a way between diverse teams, because people have these different perspectives, and that's what makes the businesses better as well. So obviously it takes more time to maybe make a decision when you're not all a homogenous group, but the end decision will be a better one. So it takes a bit more time at the start, but ultimately it's going to save you time because you're going to be running the business in a much better way.
You've just leapt into my edited versions of this podcast where I'm just going to be putting this out, sending it to all the startups I know, because I completely, one thing that frustrates me about, because it all comes back to hiring, right? Like hiring well takes time. And you either pay someone externally, like a recruitment business, to take some of that time away from you, or you have to commit more time to it as a team. But it's going to cost you something in terms of time. But exactly to your point, all the evidence is out there. Diverse teams make better decisions. They grow faster. So you're not. It's a false economy to not spend that time to get that right, and to kind of make sure people are kind of. And why wouldn't you want to take the time to get a business that's more welcoming, more open, therefore attracts the very best talent, whoever they may be and wherever they may come from, or what their kind of interests or kind of needs be. One of the interesting points I wanted to ask you, kind of what are you concluding on your retreat then? Because that's something I've always thought. So that came back from. So when I did last work at a recruitment business, we actually had a search business and a contingent business. So we had this kind of real melting pot of lots of kind of quite young people, lots of older, sort of much more experienced members of staff, very different backgrounds. Because one was like fast moving IT tech recruitment, and the other was like very traditional insurance. And then we had this this person who's the CEO's PA, who was also 25-year-old girl who had particular interests, where we all ended up hiring out like a West London nightclub, and almost everyone was sat in it going, why are we here? Like, we don't want to be here. So I think getting events right is actually really, really tricky. So what are you going to go with? Has it been decided yet?
Well, we're going to Portugal, so
very nice.
so, which is very, very nice. So we're excited for that. And I think it's really very much food centered. So food is generally a leveler for people. So we're just going to be enjoying lots of like local Portuguese cuisine, and just spending some time together. We've got a lovely villa that we're staying at, and there'll be a bit of work. So part of the day will be we'll be doing some some activities to get to know each other a little bit better, and but not too much work. So there'll also be some some other hiking, bit of a hike, and
nice.
some wine tasting as well, which would be fun.
Yeah, very nice, very nice.
Yeah,
I'm very jealous. I'll have to apply. I want to go to Portugal. But look, thank you so much. I won't overstay our welcome, because otherwise we'll see this massive drop off of listeners. But look, I think we could talk. I could talk to you all day. So thank you so much for being a guest. I'm super excited to see what you guys get up to, particularly as I think you've defined embedded for me in a way of clarity that I've not yet sort of seen, and again, I think it comes back to the clarity of your mission and sticking to that, this particular line of business, this particular solution, at least for now. So yeah, super excited to see what you guys get up to. But thank you so much, Megan, for being a guest on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.